Welcome.
Thank you. This submission is from me. It's also supported by the Reckless Residents Association. The Local Government Commission guidelines identify 3 key factors that must be taken carefully into account by the Council. They are communities of interest, in which has a prime position in considerations, effective representation of communities of interest, and fair representation of electors. My submission, which specifically refers to the Ferrymead area, involves all 3 of these factors, and in seeking a suitable solution to the issue draws upon other elements, including ward size and councillor numbers. I read the City Council's Representation Review final proposal and note that it proposes 16 councillors and 16 wards and 7 community boards. During preparation for the current proposal, Council officers identified a strong desire among electors for smaller wards, better reflecting communities, and more councillors, and Banks Peninsula participants in particular were strongly in favour of their status quo, in other words, one ward for Banks Peninsula with 1 councillor and 2 community boards. I note also that the Council wishes to move from the existing number of metropolitan electors per councillor, averaging 29,000 per councillor, towards the metropolitan New Zealand average of 16,500. This, of course, number of 16,500 is inflated beyond a real average by the council, by councils having very high numbers. To achieve this in Christchurch, there would need to be 21 or 22 councillors. The current proposal, therefore, takes us only part of the way. With regard to ward geography, Banks Peninsula, with a population of 8,580, is the obvious exception to the general rule. It's at least 5 times the size of Christchurch combined, the rest of Christchurch combined, probably 10 times if you flattened it out as the rest of Christchurch is, and is predominantly ruggedly rural and sparsely settled. Apart from 4 dormitory settlements around Lyttelton Harbour and Lyttelton itself, there's little community of interest with the wards that make up the rest of Christchurch. I would therefore support a single ward for Banks Peninsula with 1 councillor and 2 community boards, as there are at the moment, but in view of the dependence upon the city by Lyttelton Harbour residents, a ward comprising Banks Peninsula with its most connected city communities, namely Heathcote, Sumner, Reckless and Mount Pleasant, with 3 community boards and 2 councillors, would be acceptable. That's very much as the current proposal, except 2 councillors. As the commercial parts of Ferrymead are of critical importance to the coastal hill suburbs, and the residents of Ferrymead probably have a closer relationship to the electors served by Main Road and Ferrymead Bridge than to electors anywhere else, it would be appropriate to include Ferrymead in the Banks Peninsula, Lyttelton, Sumner, etc. ward. Ferrymead is in fact the ward's activity centre with its supermarket, shops and other service facilities. I therefore recommend that Ferrymead be incorporated into the Sumner, Reckless, Mount Pleasant, etc. ward. There should be a Sumner Banks Peninsula ward with 3 community boards and 2 councillors. There should be generally at least 19 and preferably 21 councillors. Communities of interest should dominate the allocation of ward areas, and consideration should be given to a 19 or 20 ward model with 20 councillors. I attach below charts showing a 20 ward proposal, and I have attached there one which says 20 wards. It's an illustration, not a working model. Are there any questions?
Questions are Andrew.
Thank you. Your proposed 20 ward model is certainly interesting, and that seems to propose keeping Banks Peninsula exactly as it is at the moment with 1 elected member. That's one of the things that doesn't come through strongly in your written submission. A lot of the information you give in the written submission is around the assumption that the Banks Peninsula Sumner ward will go ahead as proposed. And you discuss the representation arrangements for that ward, and then you talk about Ferrymead as being the key activity centre or the commercial centre for that ward, which I'm sure holds true for Redcliffs or Heathcote or those areas on that side of the hills. Do you have a view on whether Ferrymead would have a strong community of interest, or would be seen as the key activity centre for areas on the existing in the existing Banks Peninsula ward, like, for example, Diamond Harbour, Port Levy, Governor's Bay, Little River or Akaroa?
No, I don't. I think that it's very much the activity centre for the 3 coastal hill suburbs and possibly Heathcote, but not for the Littleton and the rest of Littleton Harbour, which is likely to head straight into town.
Any other? Yanni and then Jimmy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your submission. You've obviously requested for a greater number of councillors. Does the lack of an elected ECAN have any weighting in your argument in terms of having
a lack of what?
An elected ECAN?
I don't know that that's really something that we can take into account, Yanni.
Well, except you know,
I'm
mindful.
Well, perhaps I should make it a little stronger. That isn't something we can take into account when considering our representation review. Right. So please spend your time asking a question that's relevant to the representation review.
Yeah, I was just interested whether the issues that you've identified in terms of having a greater number of councillors, whether because, and I mean, the mayor's going to rule me out of order, but because don't
trifle with it. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is that asking a submitter who's put their valuable time and effort into a genuine submission that is utterly compliant with our standing orders, to have you ask a question that then takes them outside of our standing orders is just somewhat unfair. So I'll move to Jimmy. Jimmy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Based on your recommendation, if the councillor, is increased to the either 20 or 21 councillors, but what's your point of view regarding to the council staff to support those elected members, and also how to share the community facility, etc.? Yes.
I can really only speak for my own suburbs. And therefore, the model that I put up doesn't really address how one would split up the rest of the city with a larger number of councillors. But it seems a possible thing to do, as it's gone from the present, is it 13 or 14 councillors to 16, yes, with a pretty convincing sort of break-up model, with a few edges to be sorted out, like I think Ferrymead, for example. Yes. But I do think that I would certainly support having more councillors, because that gives councillors more chance to represent their electors. And I think at the moment, having 29,000 per councillor means that councillors are rather powerless to take note of what their electors are saying to them personally or directly when faced with trying to sort something out with the city bureaucracy.
I think that the point that you make around Ferrymead and its location and importance to the Sumner communities and the community where you are, Mount Pleasant, and it's probably equally important to the Brookhaven community, which we've had submissions on this morning as well, because people tend to go that way for, the supermarket and,
Yes.
Yeah, so it seems to be more the hub for that area.
It could well be that Brookhaven should be within the ward as well.
Yes, so because once we start doing this based on the existing Banks Peninsula inclusion, then it starts to get unwieldy and big, and we start to break into problems about not having, fair representation across the city. So if we were able to find a way of presenting an argument that, in fact, Banks Peninsula should be standalone because of its separation and, the issues that you've raised in your submission, would you favour a more focused ward, based on those extended communities around, but seeing Ferrymead as the hub rather than seeing it at the tail end of a ward?
Yes, I would support that. Because the current proposal, the proposal, has Banks Peninsula as part of a Sumner, etc. ward, that would be acceptable, but I think there should be 2 councillors for it.
Right. Okay. Are there any other questions? That's lovely. Look, thank you very much, and do appreciate the time that you've put into it and coming in personally. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Deirdre McGowan.